Okay, so the application that I'm going to be working with is the Hogwarts application. So this is the one that we've sort of been using as a test bed for new Rails features. And just as a recap, this is the website that, we have a number of students that were all added by way of a seed script. Each of those students belongs to a particular house, and we can click on any individual student and go to a member page for that student that simply lists their name and their house. We had also implemented search capabilities, and I don't think that part is working yet. That we had done some work around sort of static pages, but that's not operational right now because the database doesn't include any data. But we'll revisit that when we get the admin dashboard into place. I'm on the master branch of this particular project, and so if you wanted to clone this project to work along, you could go to GitHub and to my stungai-rrc user, and it's the Hogwarts on Rails project, and you could clone that if you wanted to work along. I'm going to be doing my work within a branch, which I will eventually merge into master after I complete this stuff. So I've got 23 commits here. That's right up to, I believe, when we implemented the search capabilities, and I don't think I have any outstanding commits. Yeah, it's up to date with the origin master. So I'll just make the screen a little bit more readable. So I'll start by making a branch into which I can do this work. So I'll do a git checkout -b, and I'm going to call this adding active admin. So that creates the branch and also switches me to that branch. You can always check that out. If I do a git branch, it'll show me the different branches that exist and the one that I'm currently on. And at this point, this branch is identical to master because I branched from master to this branch. So they're both at the same point, and they'll start to diverge right now when I start to make changes to this project. The change I want to make is adding an administrative backend to the website. There are a number of administrative gems out there in the Ruby ecosystem. We're going to use one that goes by the name of active admin, and it gives you an administrative dashboard that looks something like this. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
You like it? Thumbs up. There are other admin dashboards. I'm just not as familiar with them. There is a website. So anytime you want to discover different gems within the Ruby ecosystem, you can go to this awesome-Ruby website, and sort of by category, it lists different gems in the ecosystem. And there are versions of this type of list for every technology you can imagine. I think in the previous class I quickly showed you the fact that there was like awesome Android, and then there's like the meta list, which is awesome, which lists all the different awesome lists. Really for any ecosystem that I am new to, or even even website or even ecosystems that I've spent a long time in, I find these lists invaluable. They are really a good way to see sort of what the community is using and what exists in terms of open source libraries within that community. And so if I go to the section on admin interface, you can see active admin is listed there, but so are a number of other admin gems. You're free to use whichever one you want. I find active admin really easy to use and set up. The one thing I find difficult with active admin is if you go beyond what it offers by default, you can sort of adding to it and sort of reworking what it offers, specifically reworking any of its views, is a little bit awkward because it doesn't build its views as standard Rails views. It uses another gem called Arbra. to do so. And so it's a bit of a rabbit hole if you want to sort of add things to ActiveAdmin that it doesn't support out of the box. It's not necessarily something that you find yourself doing too much within the scope of this project, though. You're free to check out these other gems if you want to. And one of the things, like as programmers out in the world, you'll often come to a point in a project where you're like deciding whether to build something from scratch or use an existing open source library for the thing, and maybe there's multiple open source libraries available, and then it's going to be on you to sort of evaluate which one you want to take on. And usually, most of these things, it looks like probably all of them, are hosted up on GitHub. And so for example, if I go to ActiveAdmin's GitHub page and I'll pick administrate as the other one, a quick way to sort of vet these kind of systems or these kind of open source gems. I want to go to the GitHub page for it. What I will often do is look at things like, how many stars and forks exist for that project. So you can see this administrate, it has 4,000 stars and 700-ish forks. If we go to ActiveAdmin, it has, double the stars and, 3,000 almost forks. That is a fairly good indicator of, if the community is liking a thing. But also more important is is this thing active, right? Open source projects often get abandoned over time. Sort of burnout within the open source community is a thing. You build a open source tool, you usually build it for yourself, you put it out to the world, and suddenly now you've got all sorts of people supplying issues and feature requests, and you find yourself doing all this work on the side for a project that you didn't realize was going to take that much time. So sometimes these projects get abandoned. So you always want to go and look at the commit log and sort of see how many commits there are, how many contributors there are, and is it being committed to regularly? So you can see it looks like both of these projects are being committed to regularly. ActiveAdmin, the last commit was just a few days ago. For administrate, it was earlier this month. It seems like it has a little bit less of an active path, but that doesn't always mean that it's not worthwhile, right? So maybe a gem that has become quite stable, it maybe doesn't need as many commits anymore. But that's some of the ways that I vet open source libraries, specifically ones that are up on GitHub, is just looking at things like the stars, the forks, the commit log, the number of contributors. I'll also sometimes poke around at the pull requests to see if pull requests from the community are actively being pulled into the project. I'll often look at the issues tab to see how many outstanding issues there are, and are these issues being worked on and actively pulled into the system, that kind of thing. So you can see there's issues on both of these projects that are all fairly new, and it looks like for at least this side of things, there's discussions happening on all these issues. So that's how I sort of vet some of these things. So you're welcome to use something other than ActiveAdmin as you want, but just make sure it sort of passes some of those initial smell tests for is it worth taking on into your project? Because if you take on an open source project that isn't supported anymore, well then you effectively become that support, right? You have access to the source code, so you can make those fixes, but is that something you really want to take on? All right, so we'll close up some of these tabs here. To add ActiveAdmin to a project, we just need to go to the documentation section here, and it steps us through what's required to add this. And step one, like a lot of gems, is just going to your gem file and adding the gem to the gem file. And so I've got this project open up on VS Code. Just going to close a few of the open files here. And I'm going to go to, yeah. Yes, we can. Thanks. There, much more readable. So I'll go to the gem file, And I'm going to go, this is a gem that I want sort of throughout my Rails application. I'm not going to limit it to one of the various modes that Rails operates in, like test mode or development mode. I just want it present at all times. So I'll just put it here underneath this Bootsnap gem. And I will say gem active admin. And I'll add it like that. There's actually another gem that I need to add, but because this is a sort of a common error that occurs when installing ActiveAdmin, I'll show you what that error looks like, and then I'll fix it. Normally, when you add a gem to a gem file, it will automatically bring in all of that gem's dependencies. But there's one dependency that ActiveAdmin does not add by default, which is the dependency on, so it does not add devise as a dependency, and so we're gonna have to add that manually. But because I always personally forget to add devise, and it sort of blows up in my face once ActiveAdmin is going, I'll show you what happens when we don't pull in devise manually. So I've got the gem here, and so the next step after you edit your gem file is to do a bundle install. So the bundle program just reads that gem file, and you will see once I've run it, ActiveAdmin will be somewhere in this list of gems. ActiveAdmin is right there. Your bundle install, if you're coding along, will take a little bit longer. I already had ActiveAdmin, the gem, downloaded to my system in its most recent version, so I didn't have to go and actually fetch that gem. It would have to do that for you if you hadn't run that command prior. So that's all well and good. There we are. And if I go to the docs, it tells me that the next step is to run a new Rails generator. So we've been using generators since the beginning of this course. Gems can actually add their own generators. So ActiveAdmin has added a new generator to Rails called ActiveAdmin:install. And so we have to run that. And this is where things will actually blow up. So this is not going to work. So if I do a Rails G for generate active_admin install, and note the gem itself was called ActiveAdmin one word, but for whatever reason on the generator we use active_admin, and I hit install here. And then, boom, it blows up. And it says, to use devise, you need to specify it in your gem file. If you don't want to use devise, run the generator with -- skip users. Well, we don't want to skip users. We do want devise to manage our users. Devise is just another gem. It's an authentication gem. And so if we go to like GitHub / I can't remember, devise, is it just /devise? So devise is an authentication gem for Rails, which is in turn built on another gem called Warden. And so this is the one that ActiveAdmin tries to use by default, but it doesn't force this choice on you, which is why it's not automatically pulled in. And so I have to go back to my gem file and add devise in as well. So once both of those are in, then I will be able to use ActiveAdmin. What this means is once you have ActiveAdmin in your system, you also have devise in your system. So if you want to add like customers that have the ability to have usernames and passwords and log in, you've already got devise in your application and you can use it to create those types of users. The easiest way to do so is just to have two separate tables for users. One table for administrative users that ActiveAdmin will set up for us automatically, and then you can have devise manage another table, maybe called customers or something along those lines, if you want to have customers that can log in with usernames and passwords. And that just keeps the two types of users separate, and you don't have to worry about like assigning users different roles at that point, because that would require probably another gem to allow for some kind of role-based users. So with that in place, I need to run bundle install again, so that'll pull in the devise gem. if in this list, we will now see that devise and some of its dependencies are now present in my list of supported gems. And so I should now, once again, be able to go and try running Rails G active_admin : install to get things going. And this time it should work without any errors. And so it outputs a little bit of information. We don't need to really read through any of that because I'll cover some, but not all of that. And you can see what it's done is it's gone and it is added a migration to Rails to create an admin users table. It has added a new model to Rails, an admin user model. It's added some test files. If we're doing test-driven development, those would be important to us. It has gone and added routes to our routing file. There's a config file for configuring ActiveAdmin, and it has also added a new subfolder within our /app folder called admin, and we'll be doing quite a bit of work within that admin subfolder in a moment. And so now we can do a Git status, and we can see that there are some modified files and some new untracked files. It looks like it's also modified our seed script for us, so I just want to see what it's done there. So I will do a git diff on the seed script. And that I'm going to have to fix up a little bit. It looks like it's added to the seed script, but it put the addition on the same line as another line. So I'm going to just quickly go and fix that up. So I'm going to go open up my db seeds file. I'm going to go to that last line, and it's appended something, but it was not expecting that there was already stuff in my seed script. That's probably that is an error. If you want to get into the wonderful world of being an open source contributor, you could now go and fork ActiveAdmin and fix that little problem and then make a pull request back to the project and say, oh, I fixed a problem that I noticed, which was that ActiveAdmin didn't put a new line in before itself in the seed script, and you could become a contributor to ActiveAdmin just by making that little fix. So you can see the line that it's added here is it's going to the new admin users table, and it's creating a initial user. And this initial user is going to be admin@example.com with a password of password, and that password is confirmed as well. And it's only going to do this if Rails is in development mode so that this default user doesn't accidentally slip into production ever. And we could update this. Like, so if I wanted to be able to log in, with a different username, I could change that right now. I'll leave it in there. admin@example.com will be fine. And I could also, if I wanted to, change this password. I can make it way more secure by putting an exclamation mark at the end of it. Isn't that how we make passwords more secure? I think so. And then I could save this file.
Houston, I have a question. What's
Yeah.
that exclamation mark?
When you have an exclamation mark at the end of create, I think it either skips validation or it skips some of like the hooks that Active Record uses. So I think that'll just bypass validations on the creation. We could look that up, but usually when there's exclamation marks involved with Active Record, it's skipping something.
Because I do it because I say so.
Yes, it is like, do this, don't worry about anything, just do it. So let's go back to here, which is my command line, and I'll just add all those outstanding changes and commit. Okay. after running the active admin install generator. Good. You'll see there was 2 migrations that were added, and so I want to run those migrations to get those 2 new tables. Before we do that, we could always go and look what those migrations are, right? So there is a devise create admin users and a create active admin comments, and we can look at those for a second. So you can see this is a migration for creating a table called admin users. And in this table, we will have an email address, an encrypted password. Active admin and devise specifically by default allows you to reset forgotten passwords. And so there is a reset password token and whether or not that's been sent or not. And a rememberable field, which is like that ability to have a little check mark on login that says like remember me. And then there's a bunch of fields that are commented out. And this is again, devise supports a lot of fancy features around how authentication works. And if you want to enable those fancier features, you would uncomment some of these extra columns. And so devise can allow you to do things like count the number of times a user is logged in, or keep track of when a user has last logged in, or even track what the user's current IP address is and their last known IP address. So those are the kind of things that you could add those things in if you wanted devise to manage those things, and then you'd probably have to edit a config file to sort of enable that feature. Devise also supports email confirmations. So if you have a system where you want a user to be able to sign up for an account and then you send them an email and they have to click on a link to confirm that they really were the person that signed up for this account, you would have to include these confirmable columns. And to allow for lockouts when there's a certain number of failed attempts, you could add in those lockable columns. But I'll leave those out and just keep the defaults in place. So I will now run the the migrations by doing Rails DB migrate. The other migration that Active Admin adds is it creates a comments table, which will eventually allow administrative users to comment on particular rows in the various tables. Oh, and this is me. So if you can see here, what's happened is I got an error. You shouldn't. I got an error because I previously ran this with the other section, and then I forgot to step my database back in time. And so because I have a seed script to populate my database, I will just go into my DB folder and do the dangerous thing of deleting my database and my schema, and then I will just reseed the database. So I will now do the migration. That'll recreate my whole database for me. I could have dropped the tables, but it would have been a little hard to do with migrations themselves because I had created those tables in a separate branch, and the schema file wasn't aware that those migrations had been applied. And so it was just easier for me to drop the whole thing. If I had been working in the same branch where I had actually created those tables, then yes, I could have used migrations to step back in time. But because I was sort of juggling 2 different branches, then it wasn't as easy as just sort of stepping back in time because those tables hadn't been created in this branch. So that's why I just did the easy but dangerous thing of deleting those. When you branch out, you have to be very careful about the state of your database. So if you create different branches, you want to make sure that if you leave a branch that went and created new tables, that when you go and leave that branch, you sort of undo any changes that you made to the database at that time. So that's one of the extra things you have to sort of juggle when jumping between branches, is sort of that awareness that if you're going from a branch where new tables were added to a branch where those tables don't exist and the migrations don't exist, you want to step back in time before you switch branches. So it's just a bit of an extra step that I forgot to do when I was working with this section and the other section. That's right, and what does that do? It probably just does what I did manually. Yeah.
Oh, so basically what you were saying is you actually created that migration, when you created the migration before you were on the branch.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I created the migration before in a completely separate branch. I ran it, and then I switched back to master, which didn't have those migrations, but I didn't change the database. And so now I want to do a DB seed because I killed all my data in the database. And I also want, you'll all want to do, if you're coding along, you will want to do a DB seed because you want that admin user to exist in the system. So we have to run that DB seed because it has that one create statement for creating that administrative user. So I'm recreating all my random students and their associated houses and some appointments and some teachers, and it will also have created that admin user. If I wanted to really quickly confirm that that admin user existed, I could go to the Rails console and I could go to the admin user model and see if there was a user in there. And like, lo and behold, there is that admin user in the model. It doesn't show the password, even though it's hashed, it doesn't show the password just for security reasons, but it's there. And if I wanted to create new admin users, I could do so here from the console, or we'll see in a moment, I can also use active admin to create new admin users as well. Okay, meanwhile, I have the Rails server running for this project, and I have it running in a separate tab, so you probably want to do that, open up a separate tab and run the Rails server, just running Rails S. If you had the server going and you're on Vagrant, you'll need to kill the server and start it again for it to pick up the addition of active admin. Yeah. Oh, admin. So I did admin user dot first. No worries. And now with the server up and running, I should be able to go to a browser tab and, oh, I guess I have it already running over here. This should still work. I should be able to go to my root route and see all of the students and their associated houses. Oh, how did that? Oh, yeah. So that's another thing I'll talk about in a moment. Active admin does a bit of a weird thing where it injects some styling and JavaScripts into your project that actually are pervasive across your entire project. And so we typically don't want that. So at the end of this lecture, I will show how we can go and do what's called vendoring those changes. We can vendor the CSS and the JavaScript that active admin wants so that it's only going to be run when active admin is running. But right now, that stuff is present here. We can see that if I went to Control U to view source, we would see that a whole bunch of new things have been added here that all sort of mention active admin. So I won't fix that right now. I'll fix it a little bit later, but this is still working. And if I go to /admin, I get a login page.
Ooh.
And I can put in my default admin at example.com email address, and the password that we set up was password, and I'd edited the seed file to add an exclamation mark at the end of it. So I'll put password exclamation mark in that field, and I will click the login button, and that will log me in. And if I put the wrong stuff in, like if I log out and try to, put in something that is, not the correct password. So if I go to admin@example.com and I put something else in for the password, and I try to log in, you'll see I get an invalid email and password message. PASSWORD exclamation mark, remember me, log in, and I'm in. So this is the ActiveAdmin backend to your website, and already it has registered 2 models that can be managed by way of ActiveAdmin: the admin users model and its associated table, and the comments model, which will allow admin users to comment on particular rows in any of the tables that ActiveAdmin manages. And so if I went to admin users, I can see the current and only admin user that's present in my system. I could edit that admin user. I could change that user's password and confirm that change, or I could change that user's email address, or I could add new administrative users. So you can have more than one admin user by clicking new here, adding a new email address, password, and confirming that password. And as long as the password and the confirmation match, it would create that new admin user for you. And then there's this comments table. What this does is that for any given admin user, and later on for any given table row, we can view that particular row, and as an administrator, leave a comment on that row. So that's just a feature that might be handy if you had a system where there were multiple admins and they wanted to be able to leave comments associated with particular rows in particular database tables. We could do that. So I could put a little comment. This is the default admin user. I could add that. And now there's a single comment here present on that row. And now what we want to do is we want to start adding other models to this dashboard. So if you remember what we have in our system, if we go to our app models folder, you'll recall that we have an appointment model, a house, page, student, and teacher. Yeah? Does it give you a particular error message? Is it just like username and password is not?
No, it's giving me routes.
Oh, a routing error. Let me just take a quick peek. I'll just pause this. All right, so now I want to go and add the various resources that I wish to manage. And I will start by managing we had that table set up at one point for managing pages. And so that was this idea of having a page model and a pages table where we could have like sort of semi-static pages present in our system. And if I, just to remind myself how I had last left this project, if I go into the routing system, when I had set up pages, I had set it up to work with like a static about page. So if I go to my pages controller, I just want to see what it's expecting. Pages by permalink. Okay. So I'm going to go add the management of that particular model to my system, and I'm going to do that here by saying Rails G for generate active admin resource. Thank you. resource, and then the resource I wish to add. So Rails generate active_admin : resource, and the resource I wish to manage is the page resource.
So that's going to give us control over the pages.
You got it. And so what it does is it adds into the app admin subfolder a pages.rb file that we're going to have to edit in a moment. If we go to the dashboard itself and reload, I now have this pages in my menu. And at least initially it looks like I can go and create a new page with a title and some content and some permalinks. And so I could be like, about us. This is the about page, and make the permanent about. This is actually going to fail. There's one step that is still required before I can actually add or persist changes to this table, but I'll show you what that failure looks like in case you ever run into it. If I click create page, it tells me forbidden attribute error. And so I have to fix that up. And the reason this is present is that in that pages table, or sorry, in that pages file that was just created, I have to whitelist the columns that I want administrative users to be able to modify. And in this case, I want the administrative user to be able to modify all of those columns. So I have to go to that admin subfolder, open up the pages, and as comments it tells me what I need to do. I need to add a whitelist that says permit params, and then I have to add these various columns in: title, content, permalink. And so I just put them in as a comma delimited list of symbols. So title, content, permalink.
Which one?
That's in the pages.rb within the admin subfolder of the app folder.
In order to create the generated pages team, the pages admin,
Yeah.
we have to have those pages controller, right?
No, you don't need a controller for that. So to bring it under active admin's control, you just need the model.
Alright.
And then once I've saved this, I should now be able to create said page. And it looks like it's worked for me.
Sorry, can you put the pages controller again just for a second?
Yep.
Because I just created it.
So the pages controller I have,
You changed something right over there, right?
I did not change anything in here, no. So that's left as to what it was before. And I should be able to load up a page by permalink if I follow the correct route for those permalinks. And that was just slash the name of the permalink. So I should be able to go to /about and load up that new page that I've created. And there's the, not very nicely styled, but the page is there. So I brought that particular model under control in my application by requesting it as a resource and then whitelisting its various properties. And I could now do the same thing for an active, for a student in the system. So if I go here and I want to say Rails generate active admin resource for student, that'll create an app admin student.rb, or sorry, students.rb. And I could go and open that up. I'm just going to close a few of these tabs. And again, I'll need to whitelist the various properties of a student. And so if I go to reload here, I'll see students. And there are all my students. If I click on new student, we can recall that there was two properties of a student. A student had a name, and it had an association with a house. Yeah, what was the issue?
It says
So if we go look at the schema for my students, so if I go to the DB folder and I look at the schema, it's these two things that I want administrators to be able to change. I want them to be able to change the student's name, but also the foreign key to the house. And so in this particular file, I need to do a permit params for the name and the house ID. I want both of those things to be able to be changed by way of active admin. So permit underscore params, and then the symbol name, comma, the symbol house underscore ID, which is the foreign key to the house. That's the one-to-many association between students and houses. And then back over here, I should be able to create new students, but also I should be able to edit existing students and change either their name or their house or both. And so, here's this person. I will add an R to the end of their name, and I will move them from House Slytherin to Hufflepuff, and I should be able to click Update now. And the R is present there, Hufflepuff is present. I should be able to delete students if I want to, and I should also be able to create new students and add them to houses as well. Create that. And there we go. And notice active admin, it's noticed the association, and it has not only, I don't have to manually put in a foreign key here, it's gone to the house table. Even though the house table is not something that is under my control, it's gone to the house table, it's loaded up all possible houses and their primary keys, and it's made a drop down for me so that I don't have to manage that association by way of the actual foreign key. It allows me to use a drop down to handle that. And now that we have the student added, we could go and we could add all the other resources. So I could say, okay, well, I also want like a teacher to be a thing here that can be managed by active admin. And I also want an appointment to be something that can be managed by active admin. And then for each one of those things, we would have to go to their admin files. I have to refresh my brain as to what exists on those various tables. So a teacher just has a name and a house. Okay, that's the teachers. So I will permit params for the name and the house ID. And then for appointments, remove that. And if I go look at the schema again, an appointment has 2 foreign keys and a meeting time. And so that's what I'll have to whitelist for appointments. I'll have to permit params for a student ID and a teacher ID and a meeting time. And with all of those whitelists in place, I can now go back to the web version of Active Admin, and I can add and edit teachers, and I can add and edit appointments. So if I'm here and I reload this page, you can see there's appointments, there's teachers. So for any given teacher, I can edit that teacher and modify their house. And for any given appointment, It shows me the teacher and the student and the time that are involved. And if I wanted to create a new appointment, I could do so by picking a teacher, picking a student, and setting a meeting time for the appointment to occur, and then creating that new appointment. And it's now added because I whitelisted those parameters as well. And so there's the 11th appointment in the system, which was done by way of adding a new appointment through that join table. So there are some other things that you might have to do with active admin, but not all Rails projects will need that to be done. One of them is sometimes you have many-to-many associations for things like categories. So you can imagine having a product in a system that can be associated with categories, but not in a one-to-many kind of way, but in a many-to-many kind of way. And you might not want to have to handle that by way of the join table. So imagine you have, hundreds of products and maybe even hundreds of categories. You don't necessarily, every time you want to associate a product with a category, go to the join table, find the product out of a list of 100, find the student out of a list of 100. You might like to do that from the product. So when creating a new product, be able to pick from a list of categories and have that done solely on product creation or edit time rather than going and fiddling around with the join table. I have a separate video from a former run of this course that covers that. I'm not going to show it live in class. I'm just going to give you a link to that video, and if it applies to your project, you can watch that video and follow those instructions and update ActiveAdmin to support that kind of facility. And if you don't require that for your project, well, then you don't need to watch that video. And so that's all I've got to cover as far as ActiveAdmin. The docs for ActiveAdmin are really good, so if you find you need to go into customizing ActiveAdmin beyond what it has to offer, it's a little bit awkward to do so because you have to sort of learn this thing called Arbra, which is how ActiveAdmin does its views, but it is all doable, and the docs they're pretty well made. And so that's it for adding ActiveAdmin to a system and managing your database by way of ActiveAdmin.